Hey everybody, welcome to our podcast. This is Kanishka,
And Sugamiya.
and we're hosting the CARRM's Profile podcast for this year. And today we have a special guest who's going to share some info and details about her journey to medicine on this podcast episode.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allison. I'm a first-year medical student here at Western at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry. I've been at Western forever and ever. I did my undergrad here, and I have no complaints because I was born and raised in London, and so apparently it's a bit of a hot take to be a local, but I really like it here, and I can't wait to talk to you a bit more about my experience and why I want to stay here and practice as well.
Could you share a bit about your journey into med school, what inspired you to pursue medicine, and possibly what you studied in undergrad as well?
Definitely. I think that the journey to deciding you want to apply to medicine is a long one. And I mean that both in sort of, it takes a long time to narrow down exactly what you want your career to look like, and a lot of times even, many in my class still aren't totally sure, and that's so fine. But also it's a long game trying to get into medicine, right? So I've had nothing but time to sit here and stew about exactly what I want to do and think about how I can get there. For me, pursuing medicine was there was multiple different reasons why I wanted to do it. A lot of it comes from my past life experience. Like I said, I grew up in London and I grew up in a single parent household, didn't have a lot of money. My mom worked really, really hard. And unfortunately, at different points in my life, like I lost, quote unquote, they are both still alive, but lost both my parents to addiction. And so I saw firsthand the types of help that is needed in the London community. And so as different things happened in my personal life, I was more and more inspired to pursue medicine. One, to give that kind of help, be that saving grace for people who need advocacy. But also, two, to really push myself to do something really different than what, generations in my family had been through, just sort of rewriting history or breaking those cycles, if you will. Really important for me to be here pursuing medicine. I mean, from an academic perspective, of course, I just find it so interesting. I could probably go on and on about why, specific life experiences I have inspired me to this path from a personal perspective. But truly, I can't see myself doing anything else. And if I'm going to be studying this many hours in a day, I can't think of anything else that I'd rather do it about. There's just nothing that gets my brain going like that,
I also did hear that you are applying for a master's. Could you elaborate more about what you're doing a master's in and how that would affect the MD?
So I did forget to mention, although you asked what my undergrad program was. So I actually did an honors Bachelor of Science here at Western. I did an honors specialization in environmental science, and I did a major in biology as well. I chose that degree for a few reasons. I declared it in after first year because I wanted to do science but didn't want to do any more physics than I had to. And it took a little bit of wrapping my head around, but what I liked a lot about my undergrad degree, especially having two modules that had a fair amount of overlap but a fair amount of diversity within each of them, and each had their own unique points to them as well, was that my degree was super customizable. So I ended up studying a lot of population level health of both humans and non-human animals, and I was really inspired to take that a step further and apply to this master's. And so I've applied to the MD Plus program at Schulich, so I can take a year-long leave of absence and complete a master's. Per what I'm hoping to, or what I've studied before and what I'm hoping to go into, I've applied to the Masters of Science in Epidemiology and Biostatistics. And what I'm hoping to do is take my previous undergrad experience, both learned, didactic learning in the classroom, and also research experience that I was fortunate enough to take part of during my undergrad, and really marry that with my interest in medicine and become a full-fledged epidemiologist. Really interesting stuff. Of course, it'll make my MD one extra year, but I mean, again, if we, circle back to sort of my personal life, there were so many opportunities that women in my family throughout generations have been denied that it feels only right to sort of just send it all the way. And ultimately, a year is a year, and I'm still going to live my life in between that. And that's one thing that's really important to talk about, which I'm sure we can get into later, is that in medicine, you do have to live your life and say no and know when it's time to put down your books. But yeah, so I think it's going to be a really good choice for me ultimately, and hopefully it will help manifest my dream career of being a family physician somewhere in southwestern Ontario that gets to do research about the communities I serve. So yeah.
I mean, you mentioned how you're going to be taking a year off to pursue this master's. As far as I'm aware, typically masters are like 2-year programs. So does this mean you get it like accelerated?
There are a few misconceptions about the MD Plus program that I've come to learn. And of course, an expert in their office would be great to talk about this. But I can speak to it a little bit as someone who had to unveil those assumptions by myself. So yeah, a typical master's of science, a thesis-based master's of science, any master's that's a thesis-based is going to be 2 years. And we're only given 1 year in the leave of absence to complete it. Now, that's not to say there are some people that go over because inevitably some research projects just don't work out the way you had hoped they would and you need more time. And the population of students who apply and go through the MD Plus program is pretty small. And so from what I understand, they work with those students on a case-by-case basis. But we're really encouraged to just buckle down and get as much as possible as we can done during that time. And then if we end up in a position where we are being reintroduced to the MD program, but we haven't defended our thesis yet, that's a bit more manageable. What you really want to avoid, though, is being, full-time status in both programs. So I'm thankful that the Learner Experience Office, for example, at Western or at the medical school, they're so supportive. And I know that if I have any concerns, it's an open door with them. I can go in and talk to them at any point. And some of the potential supervisors that I've talked to as well seem very open and communicative, and they understand my goals and understand the timeline we're working with. So I don't think they're going to dump a really insane project on me, but we'll see. I definitely want to take on something meaningful, even if it does mean I have to buckle down and work a little bit harder. Personally, I've opted to start a little bit earlier off the books. So I'd be officially enrolled in the master's program starting September 2025. But I mean, if you're like me and you were trying to get into medical school, you've probably done research for many of the summers throughout your undergrad. And so I'm used to that. It's something that I'm happy to do. And again, being a London local, I'm here anyways. And so why not, get started off the books a little bit earlier if I can, give myself some more time to finish it. So yeah, so I'm hoping it doesn't throw me off too much, but we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, kind of like coming back to that, you mentioned how like a lot of undergrads do so much research, just so much Google searching, what can I do? I don't know about you, Kanishka, but for me, I never knew that you could do like an MD and a master's at the same time. So like, I guess what, how did you come across that?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because I try to explain this to people, and I don't know if it always gets across, because when you're trying to get into medical school in Canada, well, I'm not going to say in Canada, everywhere, it's hard to get into medical school. There's no doubt about that. There's so much luck involved in that admissions process that you can be the absolute most perfect applicant in every way, and you still just, you don't get it, But for me, I always sort of envisioned myself being here at Western. I sort of knew but didn't know that I would be here for medical school. That didn't mean I didn't stress about it, that's for sure, but it meant that every part of my application I worked on was sort of tailored to what I thought they would want. With that came a lot of obsessing, as I know a lot of quote-unquote pre-meds do. And I found the MD Plus program really early on into my undergrad here, actually, and I knew about it, and I sort of had it on my radar from the beginning. So for that reason, I already kind of knew what it looked like. I knew that you could do MD PhDs. I didn't think that I had necessarily the previous research experience to apply for something like that right out the gate for admissions. But it was something I even talked about with some of the folks in the MD Plus office. They asked me if I'd be interested in doing that. So, even though I obsessed for all these years about what my career could look like and getting into Western medicine,
turns out it's like pretty customizable, just like how my undergrad was too, right? If I really wanted to, I could apply to MD PhD now. Not that I think I want to do that, but like it's, as long as you're in, once you get in, there's no door that's really closed for you, which is really great. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it did. I think
it's really helpful that, our listeners know that like the Western like admissions office is like very open to like customizing your degree, making sure that you're reaching your own goals and your own careers. And it's nice to know that it's actually like making an impact on like students' lives.
For sure. This is something I tell people all the time who are trying to get into medical school. It's that it's such a cliche, like you might hear this on Reddit, like you'll hear this from your friends who are in upper years, but like honestly, just do what you like to do. I knew that I liked to do science and I didn't want to do physics. And so I did environmental science. Turns out I fell so in love with it and it was everything to me. And it became a huge part of my med school application is all the opportunities that my interests in sustainability and sustainable development afforded me. That became a huge part of who I was as a medical school applicant, and it's still a huge part of me as a medical student. There's sustainability groups at Schulich. It's part of some of the research I do on the side. I actually just signed up for a course today. I think it's University of Calgary. They offer some of those Coursera ones, and it's a certificate related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And so, continue learning and even some of the research skills I developed while studying the environment, because when you study the environment, you're kind of studying everything. I don't want to lose that. And that was part of the driving force of pursuing a master's in medicine. It's because those skills mean a lot to me and they were hard to develop. So honest to God, do what you like. I know a girl who did MD PhD. She did a PhD in like core inorganic chemistry. Like, why not, right? My old family doctor here in London actually did an MD PhD. Her PhD was biochemistry. You can really do anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be research related to patient care or medications like pharmacology. If you want to pursue a really intense side hustle or hobby in like violin, like please do. I don't know if you guys know violin MD. I forget her last name, but her name is Siobhan. She's a Mac Med grad. She did her undergrad in violin. She got into Mac medicine and now she's a rheumatologist. I believe she's in Toronto. Like she does like the whole influencer thing. She's amazing, but like a really good example of like honest to God, do what you want. That passion will shine through in your application and be much more impressive than like core natural science competencies. Promise.
Totally true.
I think like a lot of pre-med stress about being, unique or like trying to find their niche, like trying to find it early on. And it's like, I think you kind of inspired people to like start like doing what you want to do and stop thinking about what other people would want you to do.
Thank you. It means a lot to me to hear that because that's a really important message I want to get across and something that I try to tell people, every year when it comes to, can you read my essays? What do you think about my ABS? My word is not God. I don't know what the admissions committee is actually looking for, but I can tell you that a lot of people that I know that have been successful in their med applications have something about them that's a little bit unique and something that makes them a person outside of medicine. And so who is that person, right? For me, it was someone who came from a low socioeconomic background, who has a really deep passion for environmental sustainability and who was born and raised in this community, loves it, and who's dedicated to serving it, right? I also have other interests like I paint and I used to have a podcast as well. And that stuff was really important to me. And suddenly I was a lot more things than just a pre-med, right? And you'll get there, you will. That didn't develop overnight.
Yeah, sure. I think that's especially true. I feel like even if it's like, setting yourself apart, I feel like not a lot of pre-meds kind of explore fields other than just, your traditional sciences, and that too, like traditionally just biology and chemistry. So I think it's really interesting to hear, all these stories about how there's so many people, even you, who, ventured into other areas, the sciences, even other fields of study as well, and still managed to be incredibly successful.
Thank you.
So yeah, it really is. I mean, I guess we can move on to like the admission process. You kind of mentioned, your application, what medical schools look for. So could you explain your overall like admission journey from undergrad to how you got into med school?
Definitely. This has been something that's been on my mind a lot lately because this is the first med application cycle where I'm not thinking about it anymore. So it feels kind of good, and it's offered me an opportunity for reflection. And hopefully that reflection will turn into, some good advice for some other people. But what I can say is, again, my word is not God. I don't know the answers. I'm not on the admissions committee, and I'm thankful that they chose me. I'm still convinced it was maybe a mistake, even though they tell us, like, no, it's very intentional. But yeah, what I can say is that it's really important to be strategic, and it's really important to be realistic with yourself. And I'm very open. I have no qualms about sharing my metrics, my GPA, my MCAT score. I do not mind. As an aside, I think it's really important to be that way. Not saying, all medical students should, but or that they have to. But for me, I know that my GPA is not like a top 3.99. I didn't have a 520 MCAT. And I hope that by sharing, there are some listeners who feel a little bit more self-assured that just because they don't have that stuff, they're still competent and they're still able to pursue this path and be successful. I mean, I got into medicine right out of undergrad, right? So clearly, being strategic and being realistic with myself was helpful. And anyways, I just hope to instill that upon others that you can absolutely still do it. So what I mean by being strategic, part of what I mentioned earlier in the episode was related to sort of knowing but not knowing that I would end up at Western. And so I sort of channeled that into everything I did in undergrad. I always thought about, every year their admission statistics coming out and if I was meeting that bar. And you always kind of hear about how Queens and Western like your extracurriculars, and U of T and likes a really crazy GPA, and McMaster wants a crazy CARRM score and Casper. And you kind of know what each of these schools prioritize. Of course, all of them like everything, but the big ones to focus on for each school. And so when I was engaging in extracurricular activities when I started, I thought about, okay, which ones can sort of fit into my story as my story stands now? And then over time, I fell really deeply in love with some of the stuff I was doing. And so those things, I stuck with them, which showed some longevity as well as some passion. A lot of those things I was fortunate enough to work within staff offices at Western too. So there was opportunities to really make some meaningful impact on campus. And if there was ever a time to take what I was doing on campus and do it within the community at large as well, that was really important to me, because that fit into my story of, I love this place and I know what this place means. When it came to application writing, I wrote about that stuff a lot, and I wrote about how I continue to do the things I did because I loved them and they served the people that I care about most. And also I understand from a bit of a different perspective the needs of those people from both lived and learned experience, right? So all that's to say is my story was the central component of my application, and everything I did had to fit into it somehow. And again, I spent a lot of time stewing about how to make that happen. In terms of my being realistic with myself, I knew that at a certain point when it was almost my turn to start applying for medicine, that my extracurricular profile was going to be the thing that stood out most. I knew that I had done some great research. I got some really great awards. I was fortunate enough for that. It came out of really meaningful work. And so I felt like these awards really spoke to my character and the work I like to do. I had great hours for things, all that good stuff. What I didn't have was a 399 GPA or a 520 MCAT. I had a 507 MCAT and I had a 125 in Chem Phys. And I panicked about it once a day. And every summer after I wrote it, I signed up for a new test date and canceled it because I just didn't have the space in my mind to rewrite it. But I knew still that I met the cutoffs for Western Queens. So okay, maybe I'll try, because again, I have this good extracurricular profile to sort of boost me up here. But I was also a little worried because I, again, didn't have a 399 GPA. I had a cumulative GPA, I think it's in the high 3.7s, and a 2-year somewhere in the 3.9s at the time of application. So for Western, that's pretty good, right? And I'm swollen. So if you're not familiar with that, that means that if you were born and raised within Southwestern Ontario, that Western's medical school looks at your application a bit differently. That 125 Chem Phys isn't a deal breaker for them. So I knew that based on my MCAT score, I was fine for Western. Based on my 2-year GPA, I was fine for Western, and they would love my ECs. Okay, great. Queens, I applied there as well. Those are the only 2 schools I applied to, and I got both of them. Well, congratulations. Thank you. With Queens, I still wasn't 100% sure because I didn't have a great cumulative GPA. But I was encouraged to take a chance, and I knew that I could make up for it if I did really well at Casper, right? I didn't bother applying to U of T because I didn't have a great cumulative GPA. I didn't bother applying to Mac because I had a 127 CARRS and I didn't have a great cumulative GPA. I didn't bother applying to NOSM because I'm not northern or rural. And I didn't apply to Ottawa because I didn't meet their internal GPA cutoff of, I believe they said in a webinar once, it's 385 or something like that. And I didn't have their prerequisites. And I didn't apply out of province because why would I do that when I don't have a crazy GPA and I'm an out of province student? So I was realistic, right? I knew my best chances would be Western and Queens. I was right. Thank you for that. Both of those schools and admissions committees. But I also knew that being realistic with myself meant that I could be everything that these schools want and I would still not get it. And so I told myself, if I don't get it, that's when I'll look at my application, those weak points, and I'll see where I can improve. I can probably improve with my MCAT. After that point, I would have had an extra undergrad GPA year, so that would have been an improvement there. And maybe I could save a little bit of money and start applying a bit more broadly. Like I considered applying to U of T with one of those academic explanation essays. But yeah, it was definitely tough, but that's the biggest piece of advice I can give to people, is be strategic, be realistic. If you have all the money in the world to blow on applications, I mean, go right ahead. But if you don't have what these schools are looking for, you're setting yourself up for failure. And there's nothing more heartbreaking than hearing other people or seeing people going through those motions of getting those rejection emails, because they can hit, right? They can hit really, really hard. So yeah. I don't know. It was a bit of a tangent, but I hope that was clear.
No, that's actually very helpful. I feel like a lot of pre-meds, like especially now, like it's finals and everyone's like stressing about their finals exams, their GPAs, all those marks. And I think at some point it becomes kind of obsessive where, you're like, these grades are my life kind of obsession. And I think like your grades might not just be everything. And I think it's like really important for people to wake up from that sometimes.
Tough because you want to push yourself outside of your comfort zone to develop skills and to get better at things that maybe you're not the most strong at. But when it comes to this, you have to identify where you're strong and be stronger, right? Because the competition pool is just so vast, right? And about GPA, it's tough because I say that, yeah, I agree. Grades are not everything. I certainly have enough mediocre grades on my transcript from both. I went to Fanshawe College before Western from both that time and throughout my undergrad, especially in first year. I'll never forgive you, Chem 1301. But I think that there's also ways around it, right? Like certain schools are more forgiving with certain marks and years that they'll shave off of your GPA. And I think it's important to look at those and then look at what the rest of, that application would look like as an ideal candidate for that school and trying to fill those gaps, right? Instead of, shooting for schools where your application honestly just isn't going to make the mark, right? Grades are not everything. They do matter. Of course, like the, antithesis of what I'm saying is, or maybe not the antithesis, but like the important other point to make is that GPA is unfixable. And so it is important to try really hard. But know that you can still be successful with a 67 in 1301, because that's what I have. And it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine.
It's actually very helpful, though. Yeah. I feel like a lot of first years are stressing right now, including us.
Yeah. Maybe like you mentioned some like extracurriculars that you did, like research and all of that. Could you like elaborate on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. In terms of how I got myself into these positions, I don't know. I remember in my first couple of years of undergrad, like maybe first year, second year, and some of third year, it was a lot of cold emails and just like showing up to things and trying to network. Second half of third year through fourth and fifth year, these opportunities just came to me because I had worked so hard at networking in the past. So when they say like, oh, university's all about networking, like they're really not kidding. Even though like I'm also tired and want to go to bed and don't want to go outside, definitely go outside because it'll make a big difference. In terms of research, where did I even start with research? Oh, it's funny because when I started looking into research opportunities, I shot a little too high. And I set myself a little close to the sun, and I didn't regret it, and it was a really great experience, but I wouldn't recommend it for anyone else. So my first go at research was field biology research. I was lucky enough to be awarded an NSERC in the Department of Bio here at Western in my second year. And so I spent that summer holding this big fancy grant that I was very proud of. And then as soon as the whole glitz and glam from that was over, I actually had to do the work, which was fine. And I was happy to do the work, but it was hard work. It was, again, field biology. Like it was August, July, heat in the field, covered in like gear. And it was just, I don't know, it was great and really enriching. And I don't regret that experience. And I took a lot of learning from it. But I didn't even really use it on my application. I didn't even talk about it because I didn't. The research unfortunately was not successful. The relationship with my supervisor unfortunately dissolved. And it just didn't turn out what I, was hoping it would be. And then further research I did in the future had nothing to do with field biology. And so, definitely dip your toes in before you start applying for NSERC grants. But I mean, it was a cool experience. After that, I tried to take opportunities that I got in class and bring them outside of class. So for example, in one of my classes in first semester of third year, we had to write a literature review. So I wrote a literature review, and then I took that feedback I got after it was graded, and I went crazy editing it, and then I submitted to the undergrad journal. And that was great. I mean, I'm not saying it's just the undergrad journal, but it's a baby step, right? And that was technically my first publication, so that's pretty cool. And then I applied to the USRI program here at Western once I had started figuring out more so actually what kind of research I like. No diss to field bio. It was really interesting, but holy, it is just not my jam. And that's kind of how I started thinking about epidemiology and stuff like that. And so I did a USRI. I have something else in the undergrad journal, copy editing right now.
Sorry, could you just elaborate on USRI?
Yes, sorry. So the USRI program is the undergraduate student research internship program. It's an award similar like the NSERC is, and so you get paid, and you sort of hold a tenure of an award, and you're paired with a supervisor, and throughout the summer that you're paid and you hold the award, you do research. And I like the USRI program too, because at the end of the summer, they give you an opportunity to do a poster presentation, which was really fun. So yeah, I ended up doing research that turned into my undergrad thesis, which was another huge research opportunity that I'm supposed to be editing and hopefully publishing too, but it has not happened. And then I ended up applying for a 3M National Student Fellowship, which I got, and we are currently still doing research right now too. So yeah, lots of different opportunities. Just to be specific, they're kind of all over the place, like in terms of topics wise, but I feel like that's okay because I think it takes people a long time to, again, get to where they know exactly what they want to do. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's good I'm open about it because, yeah, the topics of my research throughout the years have been all over the place. And I think it reflects that journey of wanting to learn and grow and figure things out. And that's totally okay. So I'm proud of my field bio research. And I'm proud of my like very random literature review about black mold infections and people because I don't know. It was good experience and it taught me a lot about discipline. And from those little projects, I mean, I did a talk at EnviroCon here at Western. Again, I did a poster presentation from the USRI program. I did another poster presentation through an internship I did here through Western Heads East.
Your passion for like the environmental sciences kind of just really like shines through really like through your experience. I think maybe it might not have been your favorite, but like we can tell that you learned a lot of skills, and the way you talk about it actually gives me goosebumps because like I can kind of imagine myself, I hope in the future.
No, for real. It was very important to me to like try it and give it a good, honest go. Because if I didn't give environmental science a good, honest go, then I'd be doing physics and I didn't want to. And so I really tried it. And then I don't know if you know Paul Minsink. He's a professor here at Western. He, I believe, is currently the director or acting director in the Center for Environment Sustainability here, runs the Masters of Environment Sustainability program here. He was my first year teacher in environmental science, and he was so passionate, sort of like what you just said, where I could feel it and I could see it, and that really inspired me. And then over time, as I fell in love with what I was studying and I could actually study it because I didn't hate it, I became more passionate too, and it was easier to tie that stuff to medicine. So,
I think not with other med students that I've also talked with, a lot of them say like the biggest part of the application process is creating your own story and kind of centering your application based on your own unique passions. So yeah, I think it's very inspiring hearing the same about you, about environmental science, about the impact that you want to have on the London community based on your own experience having lived here. So yeah, I think that's kind of...
Actually, how is your MSc, like when you applied for the master's program, how did it differ from applying for med school?
Oh gosh, okay, it was super different. So when I applied to medicine, I also applied to master's programs because obviously I didn't want to be left stranded with nothing to do. So I applied to the Masters of Environment and Sustainability program that I just mentioned, run by Paul, and I had also applied to a Masters of Public Health. Those were very different because a master's application is sort of a step up from undergrad application. So, you get your transcripts in order. But similar to med, you're going to need some referees, and you might need a statement of intent as well for a master's. Applying to the MD Plus program, I also needed all of those things. But when applying to master's programs like the MES or the Masters of Public Health, I did that through Student Center like you would when applying to any program. But through applying for MD Plus, I actually had to email the coordinator of the program directly. So that was kind of different. Applying to medicine obviously is much more involved. You need like a million references. I also, when applying to Queen's, I applied to Queen's Lakeridge, which was their dedicated family medicine track. So you needed 2 more references and 1,000,005 essays. For Western, I know they just reduced it for this year, but I wrote 2 about me essays and then 8 essays for Western. Whereas for my master's that I applied to, including the MD plus the 2 I applied to when I applied to medicine, it was 1 each. And so it was really nothing. And I was much more intimidated asking my referees to provide references for med than I was for a master's degree. Mm-hmm. When I approached them about the ones for medicine, I had said, this is the deadline. If you need anything, please let me know. If this is beyond your capacity, please let me know. Please highlight this. Don't you remember when we did this together, Whereas from a master's program, I would reach out to people who've seen my research experience and know, they can speak to my competencies. And I was like, hey, can you do this for me? Thank you. And that's, obviously I'm still appreciative and very grateful, but there was something... I don't know, just the stakes for medicine are much higher. So yeah, of course, the application for medicine is much, much more involved. Plus the ABS too, if you know about the ABS, that's your extracurricular profile.
Oh, okay.
So when you're applying to medicine, you need to write every single thing you've ever done ever, plus who they can use to verify that you were telling the truth, plus your hours, plus when it started and ended, and then a description of that activity. And you don't need that for a master's, it's fine. Maybe the equivalent is a statement of intent, but yeah, very, very different.
I think a lot of your time goes into applying for med school.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I honestly think it might have taken up years and years, I guess.
Truthfully,
just planning this out.
Yeah, exactly. When I talk to people about being intentional, being strategic, in my mind, that kind of is like a planning your application. That's where that comes in, spending years and years thinking about how to write about this stuff. And even when I was an undergrad, I had a list of things going for my ABS or my extracurricular profile. And every time I got home from doing something, I would just update it in my OneNote and then forget about it, right? So every week or after every meeting I had with an organization, I would just put a 1 beside that organization's name, and I would keep track over the years. So it took me years and years and years to apply for medicine, even if the application opened in July and it was due in October. All that time really, those couple months, I spent compiling all that data and information I had from over the years to get that done. And again, for a master's degree, and I'm sorry, Paul Mensink from the MES, if you're listening right now, I did write the statement of intent and pull my application together in a day. But that doesn't mean I wasn't going to attend the program. I was really excited about it, and thank you for the acceptance. But yeah, it's just a different game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think building your profile took so long. It took so much time, but I think it worked out in the end. And I think a lot of people don't know that you have to keep track of everything.
Oh my gosh. Start now. If you're applying to medicine, wanting to apply to medicine, start literally right now. Over the break, I know we're tired. Start now. I think it might be most helpful to even just build a CV. A CV is everything you've ever done, different from a resume. A resume is tailored to a job. But if you have a CV, you have a running list of absolutely everything. When it comes down to filling in that application, would you have a much shorter time frame to do for medicine? It's going to make your life a lot easier. I promise you. and you're going to be much more organized.
I guess I'm gonna go home for the break.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna start on my
Do it. Honestly, do it.
Yeah. Well, kind of switching away from like the academic necessarily, like, what is, a typical day in your life looking like, or a week?
because like this is your first sem in med school. So like, how do you find your first sem? Like, how did it go?
Oh gosh, it went well. I haven't failed anything yet. I do have one more exam coming up in a few days, and so I don't know. But it was super different from undergrad. As you both know, in undergrad, you take 4 or 5 classes. Let's say, Mondays, you have a class, same one on Wednesdays, same one on Fridays. You might have a different one on Tuesday, Thursdays, might have some stuff in the evening. Your time is divided, and you don't have as much variability week per week. You sort of know, okay, Mondays suck because I have morning class, I had a lab and a this, or, Tuesdays I have off, this is great. Whereas in medicine, I found that it's so different. It's extremely variable week by week and even day by day. So instead of 5 classes that we're in, you can kind of think about medicine, at least at Western, like we have 1 class, and it's called Foundations of Medicine. Next semester, it's called Principles of Medicine. So, big step, big crazy jump. But in the first semester, it's 1 class that takes up the volume of 5 classes, but we still have other classes, kind of. So that 1 class, that's our didactic learning class. That's our in-class time. That's our traditional lectures, where we're learning, we're asking questions, and we write exams. That's the big one. Interestingly, though, it's sort of flipped classroom style, and so most of our learning happens online, and then we go to class to consolidate information and to ask questions to professors. The other thing about Foundations of Medicine, or that didactic learning, is that it's block style. And so, again, instead of having 5 classes where we have cardiology, respirology, it's 4 weeks of this, 4 weeks of this, 4 weeks of this, 4 weeks of this. And so, for example, over the last 4 weeks, we've been in our infection and immunology block. And so learning about the immune system, learning about common and uncommon bacterial, viral, fungal, parasitic infections, and also the drugs to treat them. Prior to that, we did 4 weeks of hematology oncology, and so blood and blood cancers. And then prior to that, we had some sort of miscellaneous blocks about like breast cancer and intro to pharmacology and stuff like that. So if you don't like a block, it's a really tough 4 weeks. But if you do like a block, it's really great because it makes the studying a lot easier. So that was a lot about that 1 class. But yeah, pretty much medicine is 1 class. Although there are technically other classes. And so I have also clinical skills. That's something that you have at every med school in Ontario. And once a week, I go with a small group of students and we meet with a physician facilitator in the clinical skills building here at Western. And we also have a standardized patient, and that's where the facilitator will teach us how to do physical exams, or will teach us how to do patient interviews, and so how to collect a history, or how to navigate a really difficult patient. And by difficult, I mean like, one that doesn't want to give up a lot of information, is feeling shy, or one who might be, feeling distrust in the medical system. How do you build that trust with them? And so we get put into simulated patient encounters. So that's another class. We also have an experiential learning, quote unquote, class where part of that class is we have a mandatory number of hours we have to do volunteering. We also have a research project that we have to do. And we also have what's called longitudinal clinical experiences, where we've all been paired with a family doctor and we do half days in their clinics, which has been really, really fun and probably where most of my learning has come from. So for me, on a typical week, I'll start off Monday. Typically class starts anywhere from 8:30 to 10 and then goes till about 12:30. We have lunch. I typically have some time in the afternoon to study or do some of those online modules for Foundations of Medicine before class later in the week. And then in the evenings, once a week, we have these sessions called ISGLs, or Integrated Small Group Learning Sessions, where different physician facilitators come in and teach us about healthcare law. And we go over cases of patients and talk a little bit more candidly and more deeply, I suppose, about certain issues in medicine that we'll have to overcome, like ethical dilemmas and stuff like that. So very Casper-esque. So that's like Monday, typically we have protected study days. And so Tuesdays are off. So that usually is a study day for me, sleep until 1 p.m. day for me. And then Wednesdays, usually classes in the morning. And then small group integrated learning sessions in the afternoon. And that day usually ends around 12:30. And then the clinical skills happens on Thursdays for me. So I'll have classes in the morning, clinical skills on Thursdays. Then I'll usually go volunteering for that experiential learning component. And then Fridays is, again, usually classes and some small group stuff in the afternoon. And then that usually ends at 12:30 also. So I'm on campus for full days twice a week. And then the other days are pretty open and pretty chill. That doesn't mean I'm not busy. There's certainly a lot to do. But yeah, I mean, it's a great schedule. I have no complaints other than the 8:30 a.m. classes the week of an exam makes me feel a lot of things. Next semester is going to change. So next semester, they are going to introduce cadaver labs to us. So we have done a few cadaver labs already. That's what I kind of was alluding to when I said that it varies week by week because, for example, some weeks we just won't have an SGL session or we'll have a random cadaver lab that's related to the block of content we're learning. But next semester, it's even more variable. And I was looking at our calendar. We use a platform called Alentra instead of Owl here at Western or whatever the Bright Space is now. Gosh, I'm so sorry about that, by the way. It's so bad. And so, yeah, sometimes they'll just throw random stuff in at us or random assignments at us. Like for infection and immunology, we had what's called a bug club assignment. So we were all assigned a particular pathogen, like a certain bacteria or a certain virus, and we had to study it and write a little summary about it for our classmates. And yeah, I hope that answered your question. Next semester is going to be a lot busier, but I think it'll still be manageable and okay. And if other people can do it and get through it, then so can I.
I mean, I don't know if I feel like this is a redundant question, but like, do you feel like the workload or stress is definitely higher?
Yeah,
at school?
Definitely. I think that, well, yes and no. I think, yes, it's higher because there's just simply more to learn. And your study methods in undergrad will not work. And so for me, especially the first 2.5, 3 months of medicine were really difficult because I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know how to study anymore. The typical methods that I would rely on took up way too much time for the amount of content I needed to know. And it was just simply not feasible to get all of that stuff done. And so I was kind of left like, oh, okay, well, now I don't know how to study anymore, which can be really scary, right? When you've relied on a certain system for so long that's been really successful for you. So that was definitely a learning curve. And I still don't think I fully have it figured out. And I think a lot of med students will tell you that you kind of never do really have it fully figured out. And you have to be okay with that. You have to accept at a certain point that you're just not going to get through everything, and then that's okay. And that you're not going to know everything either, and that's okay. And I think that's really important to highlight. And I hope if that's scaring anyone, you know, it might be helpful to hear that it's also pass-fail. And so it's okay as long as you get at least a 70% on the test, you're going to be okay. Sometimes trying to get the 70% is really difficult, but, you know. So, yeah, I find it to be a bit more stressful because I didn't know really how to study, and I still don't think I've fully got it down pat. But also, I know that if it's really, really difficult, then there are some things I can sort of just gloss over, and I will learn them again, and I'll be okay as long as I pass.
Sounds like your day is very like flexible. I feel like
Yeah,
your schedule is very flexible. I think every day you come in prepared to learn a new thing.
yeah.
Sounds very different from undergrad. I
Oh my
think
gosh.
what you're describing actually.
Very, very, very.
You're doing a lot more like hands-on and actually like you're seeing the application of knowledge.
Oh yeah.
We're doing that.
Yeah, it's just blind studying. I feel like.
Oh my God. I found that in undergrad too, when I'd be learning about a concept and then I'm like, okay, I can envision this in my head or like watch a YouTube video, but truly what's going on here? Whereas now I learn about a concept and then I'll go into those longitudinal clinical experiences and be with a family doctor and see her do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's really helpful. Like, for example, we learned about screening tools for certain mental health clinic or certain mental health disorders that you'll see commonly in a family practice. One of which is a screening tool for depression that I saw that family doctor administer with a patient who the patient, obviously consented to me being there. But it was great to see it in practice. And now I don't have to memorize what's on that screening tool because I remember it from her saying it aloud. So yeah, it's very application based, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I think this is very interesting to hear, actually. I was very curious about how med school would work in comparison to undergrad, because this is very different than what I envisioned from high school. I think I think most people just think, oh, med school is just grueling, it's just taking so much time out of your schedule, but I think it sounds very flexible, at least here at Western.
And then also I feel like a lot of people just focus on getting into med school and then automatically they see this always studying when you're in it and you're always reading books, all of that. But I feel like from what I've heard, it's a lot more application based and you're actually getting to apply your skills and knowledge.
Anyone who has written the MCAT or is in medicine will sort of, maybe they'll resonate with this, but on the MCAT, what you'll find is that a lot of these questions are going to be application based. And so it's not necessarily a rote rehearsal. What is the mechanism of this, or what protein does this? Which cofactor in the Krebs cycle is responsible for this? You might get a few questions like that in a section on the MCAT, but really most of them are going to be pulling from both the passage that's in front of you and also a little bit of your previous knowledge.
It sounds, I do want to know, do you think the knowledge that you learned in undergrad helps you?
Yes.
It's definitely the fundamentals of what you learned now.
There is a large proportion of my class that did do a bachelor's of medical science here at Western. And although I don't think that's necessary, and I would even discourage people from only applying to a bachelor's of medical science or life science, I think you can get some good information doing other stuff. I do hear from them in certain blocks that they find it much easier than other students because they are the only students in the class that have ever really learned about infection and immunology before.
I think it's true that you'll meet a lot of different people who's taking a lot of different paths, because I think, as we've said before, not a lot of people take the traditional route, and they learn a lot of things that other people might not have taken.
Definitely.
And always comes in handy, I guess.
Definitely.
So now you've applied for the master's program. How do you think that's going to, change your MD journey? Because you're gonna have to take a year off, and then that's gonna be a switch, I believe, to a new schedule. Maybe it's gonna be
definitely. From what I understand, graduate studies are a bit even more flexible, right? And what I like about epidemiology is that it's a bit of a mix of, you can be in lab, you can be working with others, you can be working in the field, you can also work from home. And I'm a big work from home girly. That's just my preference. And so I think that'll be fine. I'm looking forward to exploring this more niche interest of mine that we get a little bit of public health, population health stuff in medicine, but not a ton, right? Unless that's something you're really interested in. So I think it'll be good on that front. I know that the readjustment back into medicine might be a bit difficult, but that's why I'm applying to the master's out of first year. A lot of people do it after second year. But after second year, when you return to third year, that's when you're in clerkship. And so when you start third year, you're expected to now rotate through different specialties in the hospital. So that adjustment, I personally feel would be a bit more of a steeper curve. Whereas I don't have any qualms about finishing a master's and then going back into the classroom for second year. I think that would be an easier adjustment for me. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I don't know. In terms of career goals, I'm hoping to, maintain a relationship with my home academic institution and my supervisor as well in the labs that I've worked with here on campus and that I will continue to work with. I hope to leverage my qualifications if I can and see if I can find a position here in research or something related to epidemiology, maybe in government. That's one thing that's kind of, I didn't touch on this at all, but a little bit of a Roman Empire for me is provincial health policy and provincial environmental policy too. So who knows? And sort of pair that with family practice, and I don't know, maybe I'll end up in public health at the Middlesex London Health Unit. I don't know. I know for sure that that's the general route I want to go, and that I want to do family practice and also research. What that's going to look like down to a T, day by day when I'm a grown-up, I don't know yet.
I think the block system that you talk about, I think it helps people kind of kind of do a little trial and error, I think, or ideally what they like to do.
I had a facilitator for one of my small group sessions when we were in our hematology block, and he was really great. He was super friendly and super helpful, and he went to McMaster Medicine, and he told us that when he did his hematology block back in medical school, that he knew right then he wanted to be a hematologist, and went through the rest of the blocks, and not once did he change his mind. Did some more electives in hematology to be sure that this is what he wanted. And I mean, now he's a hematologist and he works at London Health Sciences Center. So yeah, so there will be opportunities for you to figure it out.
I mean, like, it's quite interesting to hear about how, like, med school sounds so, like, almost free in the sense that you have so many.
It's very expensive. It's not free.
But, like, you have a lot of freedom to kind of explore in different fields within medicine and different specializations. Or even, like, different areas of research. Like you mentioned, doing a master's program. So yeah.
On that topic, actually, about funding, how do you find like the tuition? Like,
oh gosh. So yeah, the tuition, like, it sucks, but it's gonna suck for any professional program that you do, and so you just kind of have to bite the bullet. I will say, sort of to what you were saying earlier about med school being free and being really supported. That reminded me of an email I got the other day where the school offers travel reimbursements and some help if you're traveling for conferences or you're speaking at things. And I thought that was really great because a part of what I'm doing with the 3M National Student Fellowship is some research on education, higher education accessibility. And my group wanted to present at a conference next July, but we didn't have the funding for it and we weren't sure how we were going to afford it. And just to know that I can be supported by my home institution to do something that big, that would be really great for my CV, but also great to share that message about inequitable post-secondary education access, to educators. Yeah, I think that's really great. On the topic of tuition, like, it's terrible. Of course it's terrible. But again, you just kind of have to bite the bullet. I can speak to the experience of not having any family support because I had, previously mentioned earlier in the episode, I don't really have a family. I'm like close with my grandma now, but that's kind of it. And certainly, she is in no position to be financially supporting me through a $100,000 education. Thankfully, there are other, channels with which that can happen. So when you apply and are accepted into medicine, you are able to reach out to one of the big banks. A lot of students will preferentially work with Scotiabank because they're, the easiest. But you're offered a professional student line of credit, which is really helpful. And so you're given, I believe it's a maximum of $375,000 or $400,000 for 4 years. It's a loan, so, like, don't go crazy. But if you don't have any family support and you need to be living on your own, or you're moving to a new city, or, you don't qualify for OSAP anymore, let's say, it's very helpful. I do qualify for OSAP, and so that's really helpful too. So I have that. I have OSAP. There's also plenty of opportunity for scholarships and bursaries and awards. I was given an award, a renewable award each year for approximately $8,000, which shaves off a bit of tuition, which is awesome. There's also like the regular bursary application through Western that you can do, which I got some from that. And so it's really important to be creative, again, strategic with like what types of awards and stuff you can apply for, but also creative, search for this stuff on your own. Because ultimately, like, no one's going to pay that tuition but you. So
I think one last point we could touch on was, what do you think, like, listeners should know about if they do want to pursue an additional degree along with MD? Like, you're doing masters, there's other people who may pursue a PhD.
That's a good question. I think I'll end off by saying that doing a dual degree, it's not just an extra time commitment, but there are a lot of different logistics involved. You have to think about the money commitment. I mean, we just talked a lot about finances. Can you afford one extra year, within your budget? If you can or can't, can that be changed? What would happen in your life that would change that? There's a few different like logistical rabbit holes in terms of finances that you're going to have to think through. But with, an additional degree, that opens the door for other funding opportunities too, right? you also have to think about your life, right? Like, who am I outside of a medical student? Personally, I'm about to be 26 years old, and I'm a woman, and I want to get married one day. And I want to travel the world, and I've done a little bit of that, but what does that look like? Do I want to get married while I'm still in medical school? I'm going to graduate when I'm 30. Like, that's kind of crazy. Personally, I actually don't think that's crazy. That's why I'm doing it. But if you hear that and that resonates with you and that's not something you want to do, listen to that voice inside your head, okay? And make your choices accordingly, because you can very easily fall into a place where you're working at something and you're not happy with that stage in your life. But it really doesn't have to be that way, because it's so tailorable and customizable. And if you want to have a baby while you're in medical school, like, you definitely can. But if you don't want to, I wouldn't pursue an extra degree. It's just, so you have to think about yourself. You have to think about your goals, and you have to think about logistics, of course.
I think that's like, that speaks a lot about like society. I feel like you're always, especially in pre-med as well, about always, reaching for the highest that you can, always try to do the best that you can. And if you try hard enough, then you should be able to get whatever you want. But like you said, you have to be realistic with yourself, and also about like what you really want and not what other people are telling you.
Everybody in your medical school class is going to be a high achiever. Everyone. There's not a single person who won't have an incredible portfolio of accolades to represent their character and their work ethic. And so when that is no longer the sole driving force of what makes you cool, it never was, by the way, you have to start really thinking about yourself and what matters to you as a person. So yeah, good to start thinking about that stuff now.
Yeah.
On that note, I think it's time to close this off, and thank you so much for taking so much the time to come out of your busy schedule, being part of this podcast.
I'm so glad. It was so nice to be here and to be invited by you guys. Thank you so much, and I hope that this reaches some people that it needs to, and some interesting perspectives can get pulled from this. And if you're a student, part of my research work that I didn't get into too much is about education accessibility and advocacy, even at the secondary school level. And so you can put my professional email out there. I'm always happy to talk to people and do my best to give some of the advice and connect people where they need to be.
I think that's a wrap, folks. This is Kanishka.
This is Sugamiya.
And thank you for listening.